talking about now?
Okay, this is tape number 3. I'm speaking with Clint Olson of Bend, Oregon, in his home. We're talking about life in the Shevlin-Hixon camps. Today is March 8th, 1995. I am Ron Gregory, and the tape belongs to me. We were talking about the last camp at Chemult, and you had told me a story one of the last times I spoke with you about how people felt about the camp.
Oh,
You recall that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you retell? You didn't tell it to me on tape, and I wondered if you'd tell it to me on tape now.
They were quite upset about Brooks Scanlon becoming the logging concern in Bend, and Shevlin-Hixon losing out, and it occurred right in December, the first part of December. Some reason I think December 7th, but that might be just Pearl Harbor Day or something. But it was around the 1st of December where we got the news from the Bend Bulletin. It came to camp and it said that Shevlin had sold out to Brooks Scanlon, and that was the first we'd heard about it, what we read in the bulletin. And some of the people were, well, all the people were upset because they thought they had a job for life when you work for Shevlin. It was the biggest outfit. They don't understand yet why the bigger outfit lost out to the smaller outfit. And people were so stunned. They didn't do much for a week or two, but after that they started to decide to move. A lot of them went down to Brooks Scanlon, and they had jobs available doing the same job they did, only at a different location. Some people had to move from the Chemult camp to the camp that Brooks Scanlon had at the outskirts of Sisters. And some of them had to move to Bend, and Brooks Scanlon had their buses operate out of the yard, the Brooks Scanlon yard in Bend, and you could either go to Sisters or out towards Pine Mountain. It really was upsetting for the people to realize that such a traumatic event could happen without any knowledge until we read the paper. And it upset people like my direct supervisor, named George Prokopovich. He later changed his name to George Proky. He was a foreman in charge of a steel gang, and I was driving Crummy, or the bus that hauled 8 or 10 people that worked for George. And he had that advancement for only about a month, and he was really proud of the fact that he no longer was a labor man. He was a supervisor. And after 2 weeks passed by, George came to Bend and bought a pistol, drove out on Butler Market Road, and shot himself in the head.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that you had told me about Chemult is that people used to say that Chemult
was the asshole of creation, and Shevlin camp was 7 miles up the gut.
Yeah. Well, so why did they think that, do you suppose?
Oh, this camp was built on a hillside. Everything we had in the pine camp vanished. We had an abundance of water in the pine camp. The Chemult camp, all the water was pumped, so there was restrictions on watering. And it was built on the south side of a ridge, and the camp had a lot of slope to it, and it was built on the Mount Mazama pumice in that area, which is about 10 feet deep. Whenever the wind would blow from the southwest, where the camp was on the southwest side of this ridge, the dust would fly all the time, and it was really it was really upsetting. And then when the rains came, the erosion that we had with that light pumice was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you could drive a car down into a pothole and it disappears. So people were not happy with the camp from the very beginning. But then when Brooks Scanlon bought them out, while we were in the process of moving the camp back near Gilchrist, what they call the Timbers Camp, about 5 miles north of Gilchrist, the new campsite was all laid out. They had cleared it and were laying the steel and pipelines and everything, and that's when they sold out.
Okay, so Shevlin was going to move the camp from the Schmaltz site
to the Timbers Camp.
Okay. And then and that was 1950.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. Well, I wonder what was going on, back at Minneapolis-St. Paul headquarters that made Shevlin-Hixon decide to sell. I mean, they were a powerful company. They had logging interests in several areas in North America, not only in Bend.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess that the representation here in Bend wasn't strong enough to win the argument about who would be the top dog in Deschutes County.
Okay. Well, I just have a couple more things to ask you here, Clint, and one of the things I wanted to ask was primarily the names of other people that I might be able to interview who worked or lived in the Shevlin-Hixon camp.
Yeah, we did live a short time in the Timbers camp. They had part of it moved, and I don't know if Bessie Allison is still alive or not.
This was the Brooks Scanlon at
Yeah.
that time. Okay.
But boy, there isn't too many. Lee Maker and Lois and Ray. Ray's gone.
Yeah, right.
And
Herb Maker.
Yeah. Herb worked for Shevlin. He never worked for Brooks, neither did Lee.
Was that because they were bitter about it, or
they went to Lee went to Moore, and when we moved up to that Summit Camp in 42. Yeah, he joined the engineers, and he went through Europe. That's where he met his wife.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is just for my own personal interest. Do you think that recording this information that we've been doing today is important?
Oh yeah.
Why?
Well, I have always said I was going to write a book, but I never get around to it, and this is an easier way of telling some of it. I know I've made a few mistakes in there, and I hope that people don't try to pin me down to all this.
No, not at all. And of course, I'll be talking with other people and asking them much the same questions, and I'll be getting back with you too, because questions will arise that I forgot to ask, or that we might have talked about that was unclear. But I just wanted to ask you, and you're the first informant that I've talked with. If you thought that it was this was a worthwhile project.
Oh yeah, I of course in future times people don't realize. I mean, they won't get the flavor of how it felt to live in the logging camp. And I grew up there, and I thought it was the greatest place in the world. And then I'd come to Bend and see the streets and the sidewalks and how you could ride a bicycle on paved streets a lot easier than you could out in the pumice. But I was never over impressed by what I found in Bend. I thought that we had a much closer knit community out there at Shevlin. Box 218, Shevlin, Oregon, was our box number.
Let me ask you this too, just for my own personal interest, because I work out doing cultural resource surveys. But when you were out in the woods, and the camps were out there, and people had some time on their hands, or even when they were working, did they ever come across Indian artifacts?
Oh yeah, a lot of people collected arrowheads.
Oh, did they? From in the woods?
When we were at Summit Camp, they'd go, that was a weekend type of whenever you had a strong wind or a rainstorm, you'd go out in Fort Rock Valley.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I know of people that have collections of 500-600 arrowheads.
Find a lot out there, but not so much in the woods themselves, huh?
No. There was, I don't think there was any artifacts in the woods, except when I was working up for Brooks Scanlon at Swamp Wells.
Where's that? I don't know.
That's north, the biggest spring north of the Polinas, heading this way. It's right at the base of the Polina Mountain on the northern edge. It's south of 18, about 5 miles south of where Road 18 goes. And while we were working there piling brush, I knocked over a few of those lodgepole, old dried out lodgepole, and when the roots came up, they were covered with obsidian chips. So I know for a fact that the Swamp Well area was used by the Indians for making arrowheads on the way to either on their way to trade up in Columbia, on the Columbia, or somewhere in this area.
My reason for asking is just simply because every once in a while, when we're out at these sites that were once logging camps, and they're now abandoned, and we're looking at the materials, every once in a while we might come across an artifact, and one can't help but wonder, was this something that was brought in by a worker and then accidentally left or deliberately left when they moved to another location? So that's what my curiosity was all about, in terms of asking whether people would go out and look for artifacts.
Yeah, I've dug up artifacts with a bulldozer when I was making roads.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, but that was before they got so uptight about moving stuff now.
You bet. I'm sure that anybody who ever worked in the woods and operated bulldozers and any one of half a dozen other different types of machinery did the same thing. It was a different world.
Yeah. I kicked up a Folsom point on road 22.
You did? Well, that's kind of unusual. Okay, well, I think that's probably it for the recording. So. Today is January 26th, 1996, and I'm again speaking with Clint Olson Jr. at his home in Bend, Oregon. This is an addendum to tape number 3 of the Shevlin-Hixon Oral History Project. My name is Ron Gregory, and the tape belongs to me. You talked about the difficulties that your dad had with the store in the camp during the 1930s. When did your dad operate the store out there in the camp? From when to when, do you think?
I'm not sure about that. Really, he operated it in the late 20s and the early 30s.
Okay.
And I can't pin an exact date, but I can remember we had the store when I was growing up, and I have a definite date. For my 3rd birthday, we had the store. And there's a number of reasons why I remember that, but that would be in 1929. And we continued to have the store until we ran out of money back in about 30, I'd say 34, 35.
Now, see, that's kind of an irony because, as I've mentioned before, when I talk with other folks, they talk about that time as the company supplying everything, and you know, there was always groceries or food on the table, and so they paint this picture of everything was going fine. But now you tell me that your dad had difficulties with the store. Why was that?
Well, he was trying to buy the groceries and everything, and he had a ton-and-a-half flatbed truck that he bought. It was, I think it was about a 1934 Dodge, and he had about a half a section of lodgepole down between Lapine and the Paulina Lake Junction, just south of the entrance to Kildano, the big ranch right there. And he hired a man to stay out there and buck up lodgepole that he would load up every day. He'd go to town with about three cords of firewood for the school district. He had a contract with the school district to supply green lodgepole in 4-foot lengths. And he would load that truck up in the morning and drive to town and unload it there across from what is the Deschutes County Library, that old school. It was a high school land. And then he would go around town and pick up the groceries. He'd had fresh produce and meat and
he'd take those back and put them in his store.
Yeah, we'd go to Hudson House. And, they had a big warehouse here, and pick up the canned goods, and he'd take a load of groceries back to camp and load them and start selling groceries.
Okay, so the people there in camp purchased some of or many of their supplies from your dad's store.
Yes.
Did he extend credit during that?
Yes, that's the problem. He extended credit, and people tried to pay, but they didn't. They weren't able to pay enough to compensate him, and so we eventually went broke. We didn't go bankrupt. We went broke, and he eventually paid off all of his bills, which were about $20,000 worth.
Well, when times got better, did people not approach him and say, "Hey, Clint, you know"?
Once in a while, we'd get a surprise letter in the mail or something. We have owed you $40, and here it is. And I felt bad about not paying my bill to you. And a lot of them did do that. Not a lot. I'd say 10 or 20% of the people actually did come through with the money they owed us, and the rest of them just wrote it off.
Yeah, because it sounds like, you know, if your dad went in debt because of the store about $20,000 some, then a lot of people who had got groceries on credit never returned the money or never paid their debt.
He just had to write it off, and eventually he had to pay the merchants in Bend to establish our credit. We never did go through bankruptcy, and he did. He paid them all a little bit each month, and he finally paid it off.
How did your dad feel about that, as far as, you know, these people out there in camp that you knew and might have known for years, and he had extended credit to, and here they never paid him back?
My dad was a soft touch. That's what they call it. He didn't like to force the issue with anybody, and if they paid him, fine, but he wouldn't take them to court or anything like that.
Okay. What was the Florence gift shop?
Oh, that was established by my mother back in when we moved to the it was at the Schmalk camp, and I think, yeah, she started in the Summit Camp when we were up there in the 40s. And she had always liked merchandising, and people asked her to pick up things. We'd go to town quite often, and can you get us some thread? Can you get us some material? And she said, there's a market for that stuff in this town. People did make a lot of clothes back in that period. And she started out with thread and material, and she started buying Levi's and work clothes, and it gradually kept building and building. We had a greeting card outlet from Chicago that supplied us with a big catalog. We could get any type of greeting card we wanted. And she developed a line of credit, and she was listed in Dun & Bradstreet. We went to Portland, started buying through the major, like, the first one I remember is Her Suisse. Now, Her Suisse became White Stag.
Mm-hmm.
And that's...
How do you spell Hirschweiss?
H-E-R-S-E-W-I-S-E, I think it is. It was the originator of the White Stag, what later became known as the White Stag clothing, sporting clothing.
Did you want to add?
They built their industry on outdoor, like camping, making tents and sleeping bags.
So did she carry sporting goods stuff, clothing?
Oh yes, and well, she started with work clothes, and then, you know, it later developed into sporting goods and little gifts that people would buy each other, and then it expanded into a fountain. We built a fountain. We had
A soda fountain?
yeah, we had to comply with the Oregon regulations, where they have one faucet that has to drip into a sink, or not drip, it has to run a small stream all the time. You're Olson.
So at the soda fountain, what did you
Yeah, which is kind of unusual, I thought. But
what was sold there at the soda
ice
fountain?
cream, and I was a soda jerk, and I'd make great big fancy malted milks and milkshakes. And at first we didn't realize that there was such a thing as ice milk. And so our first milkshakes were made out of real milk and real ice cream. And you'd make them, and they wouldn't even pour. You had to spoon them out. And later, when this Meadowland delivered milk and ice cream out to the camp, and they said, well, you're putting ice cream in now? You're supposed to use ice milk. It's about half the price. And people didn't complain. They didn't hardly know the difference. But,
well, it sounds like Florence's gift shop was pretty substantial.
Yes, and when we moved into Klamath County, it was half of one of those. It was more than half. It finally extended to where we had, of a 60-foot car, we had 50 feet long and 16 feet wide. And we had a regular old Wurlitzer jukebox, and when we were in Klamath County, we managed to get 3 or 4 slot machines, the old-fashioned kind you pull the arm down, and the slot machines were put into the gift shop under the jurisdiction of the Klamath County Sheriff, Sheriff Britton. He owned the slot machine concession.
How do you spell Britain?
Brittan.
So you had slot machines in Florence's gift shop?
You bet. They didn't have a penny one, but we had nickel and dime and quarter. And,
well, this kind of sounded like it was in competition with the pool hall.
well, not exactly. The pool hall was almost 100% men. You'd hardly see anybody there. And once in a while, a fellow's wife would go down there, but we had milkshakes and slot machines in the and the women would come in and play the slot machine.
Did Florence's gift shop sell toys?
Oh yes, all kinds of toys. I got to see the latest Christmas toys in July by going down to the big warehouses down on 4th and 5th Street in downtown Portland, where you ride up the freight elevator. You got to pull the gate down. You go up, and the whole big loft is just covered with the very latest toys.
Well, it sounds like Florence's gift shop was kind of a general merchandise store.
Yes, it was. And at one time, before she built the whole thing into gift shop, it did have one room devoted in the camp that we had at the summit. Her niece was a beautician, and we had a beauty shop.
In the gift shop?
Not in the gift shop. It had to be separate. And we had the old-fashioned electric permanent hair machines and the sink, and actually my cousin, she ran the gift shop. I mean the beauty shop, and did the hairdos, and we didn't cut hair. That was the barber. The barber had the cutting of the hair, but my cousin was a beautician and did the curling of the hair.
Permanence.
Permanent, yeah.
How many women could be given permanence in this shop at once?
About 4.
About 4, huh?
She had 2 dryers and 2 permanent hair machines and 1 sink.
So Florence's gift shop then began at the Summit Camp and continued on into the Schmaltz Camp?
Yes.
Okay. And was there a particular time when she stopped, finished up with the Florence's gift shop?
Well, yeah, in 1950, when Brooks Scanlon bought it out in December 1950, that was the end of it.
Okay.
But we were still operating right up to the last.
Right. But she didn't operate it after Brooks took over then?
Well, let's see. I beg your pardon, she did. When we moved up to the Timbers Camp. That, I'm glad you brought that up, because we continued to have the Florence gift shop when we moved up to the Timbers Camp under the jurisdiction of the Brooks Scanlon. I'm sorry I made that mistake, because you said you were concentrating on Shevlin, and then suddenly it dawned on me, when we moved up to the Timbers Camp, I was interested in television. In 1952, I got a Yagi antenna for Channel 5 from the YAGI. It's a type that most farmers have, and this Yagi antenna from Northwest Electrical Distributors in Portland, and we got television set, and I said, I understand they're broadcasting television from Medford. This was in 52, before any station started broadcasting in Portland. And I set it up when we were down at Timbers Camp in 52, and we were able to get the Friday night fights from Medford. And people would drive out from Bend to see the boxing matches on RTV.
How about that? Well, with Florence's gift shop then, did she continue running that until your mother and dad were done out with the camps?
Yeah, well, they closed the camps in 56, and that was a termination of it then.
Okay.
But one of the things we did sell a lot of in the 50s was refrigerators, Gibson refrigerators.
Where did those come from?
Portland.
Okay. Did people come in and order them through you?
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't have an inventory of refrigerators.
Well, we had an example of it there in the gift shop, where we would keep. We had a freezer that we kept popsicles in, and they said, "Well, can you give me a good deal on a refrigerator?" And we'd order it, and the Bend Portland Truck Service would haul it right out.
Okay. All right. It says in this text, I believe done by the Forest Service, in asking you questions, that the owner of the pool hall in camp, Shorty Wilson, supplied the bats and the balls for baseball.
Yes, he was interested in helping the kids get something to do besides mischief they could get into, and he finally had a whole locker full of softball and hardball equipment, and they'd try to incorporate it into what Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, but he was able to, somehow he had some connection with probably the Bend Hardware to get the stuff wholesale, because he was giving it out to the kids to use.
Did Shorty Wilson have kids out there?
No, he was a single individual.
So Shorty Wilson supplied the balls and the bats, gloves, for the kids' baseball. The company didn't supply that?
No.
Did the company ever supply any of those?
I think my dad mentioned something back in the old days. They used to have a bowling league, and Shevlin-Hixon would buy the shirts and stuff like that.
Well, when do you think this was that Shorty Wilson was supplying that?
That was in the late 40s and 50s at the Pine Camp. He started at the Pine Camp that I know of, and he continued on.
Again, here it says that life for the men in camp was hard. They worked 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 51 weeks a year. What time frame are we talking about here that they worked these 12-hour days, 10-hour, 12-hour days?
Well, that was all during the whole year. They would get that 1 week off around the 4th of July. And then later, when the Union finally came in, they started getting a 2-week vacation after you've been here for, first it was 10 years and then 15 years.
Okay, because the information that I'm getting from the mill literature and from the Bend Bulletin is that in the beginning they worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week, but then because of circumstances occurring throughout the Pacific Northwest, they went to 8-hour days.
Yeah, they might have during the Depression period that you were interested in, but what's more vivid in my memory is after World War II started, and from 39, 40, and 41, they especially after 1941 is when we really went into high gear.
Okay.
And started operating 3 different logging sites, and they were hauling those 80 cars a day into Bend.
Okay. It says here that you remember a time when there was 1 death a week. Do you have a time frame on that?
Yeah, my father told me this when he was taking me out in the woods. He would say that using the ledger woods and the slides, men would come in to go to work, and they didn't have adequate supervision as far as to what the dangers were. And he always said they should have told them how to be more careful. And a lot of the deaths occurred when the cable would come zinging through the woods, and they would be in what they call a bite of a line. And that would result in decapitation or severance of your limbs. And it was really a mean situation where that cable would go so fast across parts of the woods that they didn't realize they could do that.
Now, how were those men paid? Those people who were choker setters and
they were paid by the hour.
Were they paid by the hour, or were they paid by the 1,000?
No, the 1,000 refers to per 1,000 board feet for the fallers, the timber fallers. And they were paid so much per 1,000 feet that they fell. Each day that they fell timber, they each had a number. And they usually worked in pairs, and they would mark their logs as they fell them. And then the scaler would come along and scale, and they'd give them a scale slip at the end of the day. So then the scale slip was everything that they fell the day before, up to the time that Scalar caught him again.
Okay. Again, it was my impression that not only the fallers were being paid by the thousand, but choker setters were being paid by the thousand. Even log truck drivers, when those came into being, were paid by how many board feet they brought in of timber.
I can't remember anything like that, but there was a time when I believe they influenced the log loader, like Bogey Bill. If he would load so many cars or so many thousand board feet a day, that he'd get a bonus or something like that.
I have an old picture that comes from just before Shevlin-Hixon came out here of a crew of choker setters, log getters, basically. And on that picture it says World Champion Skidders.
Oh.
And how many cars were loaded that day, and how many board feet for a day, and how many car loads were loaded in 1 week, and how many board feet. And what's indicated to me is those men weren't being paid by the hour. They were being paid by how many board feet they brought in. And it was an incentive then.
Yeah, they may have done that back in those days, and but I'm more familiar with the paid by the hour type of setup, and the paid by the thousand for the fallers. But a reason they would establish some of that incentive or competition like that, they'd have 3 or 4 different groups that were loading logs. They call them sides, and if you had 3 different sides operating, and the top side got a bonus, they would compete that way and try to load more logs than anybody else did to get the bonus, and that was just a competition.
Right, and of course it was good for the company also.
Oh yeah,
if they paid by the thousand instead of by the hour, because of the incentive, you could go out there and just kind of drag your feet, and if you were making $1.50 an hour, well, you were insured of getting your full day's pay. If you really ran, you'd make more money.
I understand that, and but that's one of the things. I started working for Shevlin-Hixon. I beg your pardon. First, when I first started working as a choker setter, and their work incentive was, you better come on and do the job, or we'll send you down the road. They always operated that big fear of losing your job, and
well, they did.
Yeah, and I got the idea that you had to work in order to get paid out there, and that's why everybody that acted out there, and it's quite different than the Forest Service.
Yeah. Okay. So if you didn't put out work-wise, you didn't hang around?
They could fire you, and there was no reaction toward that. You can't fall back on your union. They didn't have any union up until the 40s.
Did that happen much?
I think it happened fairly often with people that were lazy, and then they considered lazy, and that's when the woods boss were out in the woods. They saw what went on. Linton would go out every day and be out there in the woods.
You ever hear the saying, if you can't fly, don't light here?
No, I didn't. I never heard that one, but
okay.
I've heard some more that were a little more descriptive.
Right. Well, let me hear them.
I want to see when you guys out there at assholes and elbows get down and get to work.
Okay.
And then the nicer one is when it was snowing real hard, the fallers would collect in the filer's shed. They had a nice big warm building with green painted panes on the roof, skylight, so they could file their saws nice. But when the inclement weather came along, they would collect in there, and it'd come Seeley when he was a bullbuck, and he said, "What's going on in here?" He said, "Is this a dollhouse? I don't see those dolls sitting around there. Get out there and get the fallen timber." And he said, "This is no dollhouse."
And how did the timber fallers feel about that?
They said they'd gripe, but they knew if they didn't go, they wouldn't get paid. You know, they got paid for what they produced. And sitting around there in the saw filer shed wouldn't quite do the job.
Right. Okay. You also mentioned here by this person that had made this interview with you that there was always a high turnover of employees in the lower paying jobs, but most of the men making good money stayed on the job for long periods of time. What were these lower paying jobs?
Choker setters, for one thing, and section hands, or people that work building the railroads. And that was the two main ones. And
did it take many men to be choker setters? Were there a lot of choker setters?
Well,
a lot of section men on the railroad?
I'm not sure of a time when they used the high wheels and the horses, but they always used these cable chokers that I'm familiar with. And when they moved to start using the gas, first the gas Caterpillar and later the diesel. In 1936 they got the first Caterpillar diesel. And using the logging arch, somebody sold them on the idea that you could haul in 8 to 10 logs with each drag into the loader or the McGifford. And they would have approximately 6, sometimes 8 Caterpillars, and they would have 2 sides coming into the loader, so it would be three different Caterpillars on each side. That would be skidding 10 logs at a time into this landing, where they they had a landing man that unhooked the chokers, and he got paid the same as the top choker setter. And he would unhook the logs, and they'd go back and get another load, and that would probably take 15 to 20 minutes for each load of logs that way on each Caterpillar. So,
but you feel like there was a high turnover in those particular employees.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, were those married men or single men?
Most of them were single men.
Okay, so there was a lot of movement, it sounds like, with single men in the camp, coming and going. And they weren't part of that core group of people who had come out from Minnesota.
And my dad said that there was a lot of them that were alcoholics, and they called them, they'd have the Budweiser flu, or Monday morning they wouldn't show up, and if they didn't show up, they might be going down the road on Tuesday. If you didn't show up for work because you had a hangover, that was not acceptable.
Unless somebody could make an excuse for you.
Yeah, and there was all kinds of, I got the flu, and that's where the phrase Budweiser flu came to me.
But, well, it sounds like there was quite a bit of drinking that went on out there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Much alcoholism out there?
Oh, yeah, there was quite a bit. But, I mean, the people that had to be straight were normally... But they did a lot of celebrating, and with the pool hall, there was a lot of beer drinking, but I don't think there was as much then as there is today. I mean, they would buy a single bottle of beer at the pool hall and drink that, and then drink another one. You'd never get 4 or 5 of them lined up or anything like that. You had to drink them one at a time, where nowadays you go buy a case or a cube, 24 bottles or something like that, have a party, but...
It also says here that families would help each other move, again strengthening their friendships. The single men remained more or less independent and neither asked for or gave any help.
Yeah, there wasn't that comradeship between the single men. Some of them were, I don't know if they were shy or like you mentioned, they were. Some of them were just here for a few days, Like my father told me at one time, he said, we got 3 different crews. There's the crew that's coming, and the crew that's working, and the crew that's going.
Okay. But this group of people, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, this group of people, the single men, the people who worked in the lower paying jobs, that there was a lot of turnover there. they apparently weren't a part of this, core of people.
No, it was hard for them because they were just, they were just short-time people with you had to be there for about a year before anybody would really invite you into their circle of friends.
And a lot of the men didn't want to wait around that long, or they didn't like it, so they left. Or
they just didn't bother, But there was bridges that were built with people, sportsmen. Some sportsmen liked to do hunting and fishing, and there was a group of men, especially in the camp, that were hand loaders, and they were making their own cartridges, and they were interested in rifles and things like that. And if you got involved with a group like that, you had friendship. And Mr. Linton was one of the hand loader type.
Right. In May of 1944, so that would have been the Summit Camp, a late-night scuffle between a logger and some soldiers left the logger in the hospital with a gunshot wound and the soldiers in the Camp Abbott stockade. You ever remember anything like that? That's from the Bend Bullet.
I'll be darned.
You don't recall that?
No.
Okay. Another thing he has is that, from Ward Tonsfeld's script, is that during the following winter, a logger was shot in Summit Camp as a result of a triangular relationship between two loggers and one lady. That is from the Bend Bulletin of February 2nd and 3rd, 1945.
Yeah.
Do you recall that?
Yeah.
What was that about?
One of the timber haulers, he kept going to work at his normal time, and friends of his said, I think his name was Hayter.
How do you spell that?
Hayter. And they said, why don't you get on the bus and just come out here a quarter mile and get off, go back and check your house out and see what's going on. And he went back to see what was happening, and I guess he had a small caliber shotgun, I guess, and from what he'd heard, that his wife was entertaining another male individual, and I guess he broke in on him, and he found out what he wanted to know, and he shot him with the shotgun, and they had to take him to the hospital, and they picked out about 17 pellets out of his scrotum.
Okay, so what became of that group of people? Did they continue to live in the camp, work in the woods?
Yeah, I think so.
All three of them?
No, some of those shot. He disappeared. I don't know.
Okay.
And Mr. Hayter's wife, I don't know if she had some bruises. I think there was a little bit of altercation between her and her husband. I don't know if she continued to stay on the camp or not, but once in a while you'd see a woman with a black eye, and it wasn't too great. They tried to keep things quiet between themselves, but there was some abuse of individuals.
Could this in some way have been also connected with the alcohol?
Oh yeah, you never have abuse without alcohol, I don't think.
Or the isolation of the camp.
No, the isolation wasn't that great. I mean, we always come to town on Saturdays, and if there was some reason, you never felt like you were in an institution or anything like that. I really enjoyed living in camp, and I think a lot of people did because of the isolation.
Well, if there was a domestic squabble, if there's a domestic squabble here in town, somebody oftentimes comes out to break it up.
Oh, yeah.
Or intervene. Was there
No, we didn't have any police, and if it got real serious, Mr. Linton might be involved.
The camp superintendent then. Okay.
Or if they had friends or brothers, they would get involved too, but
Bill Bear Jr. had mentioned to me that when his dad was out there, that sometimes he intervened in domestic squabbles.
Yeah.
As the camp clerk or timekeeper.
Yeah,
or paymaster.
he was kind of an ombudsman, you see, between the higher up of the supervisors and the common laborers.
So he was given that authority then to do that intervention.
Kind of like deputy sheriff or something.
Well, wasn't your dad in the same situation?
Oh, yeah.
But he didn't get involved in family disputes.
No, he got involved in a dispute at a turkey shoot once in Lapine. And he didn't like that at all because this individual pointed a 30-06 right at him. And he didn't like his... he had been making a judgment on the amount of whether he was shooting closer to the bullseye than the other man. And my dad said, no, you're not the closest. This other man will get the turkey. And he swung a 30-06 and pointed it right at my dad. And he said that 30-06 grew to be a 12-gauge shotgun barrel.
Okay. You mentioned Yom Woodsman. Is that correct? How do you spell that? Didn't this title of Jan Woodsman or Jan? So the Ombudsman was who?
A deputy or a representative. It says here in the dictionary, akin to a public official appointed to investigate citizens' complaints against local or national government agencies that may be infringing on the rights of individuals.
Okay. So where do you suppose this title, Ombudsman, came from?
Well, I don't know. They use it a lot in negotiations between labor and management.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily a common word out there in the woods.
No, it's one I hear.
Okay. I have this article in my hand from September 10th, 1952, in which there's a sequence of camps here that are described by one Hans Milius. And he talks about the Shevlin camps. Now, besides these camps of Lava Island and Lava Caves and Lapine, Summit, and Chemult, were those the only Shevlin camps there were?
No, I don't think so. But this individual, Hans Milius, now, he was a Brooks Scanlon man in charge of timber sales and buying and selling timber. And I don't think he was familiar with all of what Shevlin did. And the Shevlin had the Camp 1 and the Camp 2s that he never mentioned. And
of course there was
the Camp along Garage.
Camp,
and
Burn Camp, Steel Camp, Trestle Camp, Harper Camp.
And they used to establish a small camp just for individuals to lay out railroads, like the Steel Camp. And that was established during the same time you had the regular logging camp. You'd have two different camps in two different areas, one laying out the railroad for the next year's logging, and the other one logging what was presently laid out.
Okay, so the Steel Camp wasn't a timber camp then?
No, it was primarily building railroad right-of-ways and laying the steel with a track layer.
Okay. Do you remember any of the names of those steel camps?
No, they just call it. Well, you see, that's another thing. The steel camp name stayed with the steel camp. Wherever you moved it, that was the steel camp.
Okay, because I know Lee and Herb both talk about, the Spring River Camp. But then kind of west of the Spring River Camp was a camp called the Steel Camp. And then west of that was the Trestle Camp. Now, was the Steel Camp that they're speaking about, was that a timber camp?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I can't really say. But I remember them talking, I remember my folks talking about the Trestle Camp and the Steel Camp and the other camps. But I know they did have a group of people that were devoted to building the railroads, and they call that the steel camp.
Yeah, because Lee, now you see, he talked about differences in elevation and how during the summertime, you know, the camp might be situated up at a particular time at Trestle Camp, at Winoga Butte Camp. And then during the winter when the snows would hit, they might move down lower to the to the steel camp.
And down closer to the river.
And down closer to the river. Does that ring true with you?
Well, like I say, I don't have any memory of that.
Okay.
Because I'm too young. I mean, I wasn't born yet.
Okay, I won't press that then. But the article that we have here from September 10th, 1952, that doesn't seem altogether accurate to you. Is that what you're saying?
You know, Honfilius was a fitness nut, and every morning he'd get up and run up to the top of the butte and back, just before he went to work. I mean, have you ever met him?
No.
Yeah. He was about 6'2", weighed about 200 pounds, and had about a 54-inch chest.
Okay. Do you ever remember then let's see, where am I? Was the camp down by Chemolt ever known by any other name than the Chemolt camp that you're aware of?
No, unless no, I can't remember anybody calling it anything else.
Did you ever remember hearing anyone refer to it as Sugar Pine Camp?
No, but there was a Sugar Pine Butte nearby, and I never have heard it used as a designation of the camp.
Okay.
It is always just Chemolt Camp.
Okay, now there's kind of an irony here, because I know in speaking with you folks, I hear you refer to there is a Sugar Pine Camp.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that there is a Sugar Pine Butte up here just south of Bend.
Just near Bouquet.
But there's a Sugar Pine Mountain down by Chemolt.
Yeah.
And it's close to where the Shevlin camp was.
Yeah.
And I was wondering now, if the Sugar Pine Camp was actually the one south of Bend here, not too far from Lava Cave.
Yeah, that was the one they called Sugar Pine Camp.
Yeah, and that, if my map serves me right, now that, if my memory serves me right, might have been Camp 2.
Yeah.
The one that you say was the first camp you were in, because it's about 2 miles south of what we have on our maps here referred to as Camp 2, as Sugar Pine Butte.
The camp, I have pictures of my mom giving me a ride in a I had a diamond match box that was a wooden case, you know, it was 2 by 3, and they used to make wooden boxes to send matches.
I have some references in newspapers to summer vacation Bible school out in the camps.
Mm-hmm.
You remember those?
Well, I never attended any of those, but they did have such things when the kids would get out of school. There was certain groups of, let's see, old Redden, he was always interested in getting kids into Bible schools and things like that.
Right.
And my mother, since she was raised Catholic, and she finally got the Father Sheehan to come out to camp and hold Mass in our house back in the old days. But this Bible school, I can remember kids having to, well, I got to go to Bible school. I can't play no more.
It says, I have here, in June 12, 1939, it says that Max Sedgwick of Bend, recently of the Northwestern Seminary in Minneapolis, Minnesota, will be the leader of the Vacation Bible School to begin in Shevlin Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had a lot of evangelists that would come through. Sometimes we'd have big camp meetings there, everything. They didn't put up the tent, but they used the community hall that they used as a community church. It was one of those.
And how long a period of time would this Bible school go on?
Well, probably 2 or 3 weeks, as I remember, but the camp meetings would just be one night, and sometimes they would, to get people to come, they would show a movie.
Okay, so what kind of, they had movies for activities, what else?
Well, I think the company supplied some movies way back in the beginning time.
Okay. But the Bible school itself,
Yeah,
what kind of activities did they participate in, or do you know? Not.
I don't know for
Okay.
sure. I could just, they probably went on picnics and hikes and stuff like that.
Okay. When you were a child, did your family or other families ever go into town as a family excursion?
Well, as I remember, most people drove their own cars, and they didn't make a big thing of it. We just take our individual cars to Bend, and usually on Saturday.
What did you do?
Like women went shopping, and the men played pool or went to the beer joint and BS with the old timers they knew.
What'd the kids do?
They'd go to the motion picture show and the Liberty Theater, I think, with a dime, the Capitol Theater, which are both gone now. In the 40s, they opened the Tower Theater, which is still there.
Did you ever go into town for picnics or anything?
Well, yeah, we'd come in and use Drake Park or go down to the Mirror Pond.
You say that your mothers would go shopping. Where would they go shopping?
Well, Penny's and Weddle's and all those places that no longer exist in downtown Bend. They all had. And once in a while, men, it'd have to be, go to the Bend hardware store and pick up a tool that they wanted or something like that. And sometimes they would go to the Montgomery Ward store or the Sears store.
But you generally would drive in that day and then drive back to the camp?
That afternoon.
You didn't stay in town?
No.
Okay. Did you ever attend the 4th of July in town?
No. I never... Well, yes, when they had it down where Lois was... you see, they built that Mirror Pond extravaganza for the 4th of July weekend, where
the water pageant?
Yeah, the floats really floated.
Mm-hmm.
And they were supplied electrical power by a boom that Shevlin and Brooks Cannon built that ran the length of the Mirror Pond with a trolley. It's a wonder more people didn't get electrocuted to that setup. But you had electric lights on the floats by having a trolley that supplied the electricity as the float floated down Mirror Pond.
And that was on the 4th of July?
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about a pet parade?
Oh, yeah, they had pet parades. You'd use crepe paper and cover your little radio flyer wagon and put your dog up there and have him all dressed up. And the bicycles all had the crepe paper threaded back and forth between the slopes.
Did they hold a rodeo at that time?
I don't remember a rodeo, but they may have, but sisters had the rodeo.
Well, on the 4th of July, when you were a kid, did you not come into town very often?
Well, when I was younger, and that period of time, on the 4th of July, we were at Colfax Lake.
Okay.
And we were always camping. We started camping, as I told you before, to camp 1st of June until the weekend in September, Labor Day. And we would be up at Little Colfax.
So you don't really remember then a whole lot about the 4th of July extravaganzas?
No, I remember when we moved to town here, they still had it back in the 50s.
Yeah. Okay.
Late 50s, they still had the 4th of July celebration.
Right. Okay.
Until it got out of hand, and then they
How did it get out of hand?
Well, too many of the hippies were smoking dope and fornicating on the lawn.
Okay.
That was enough to do it.
Okay.
The other day when we were down at the Deschutes County Historical Society, Lee talked about there being ways of dealing with bed bugs in the bachelor's quarters in the early days. You remember anything about that?